Please welcome to the Armstrong and Getty Show, Ken, Jack's dad. Hello, Jack's dad. How are you, sir?
Hi, Joe. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, Ken. It's nice to hear your voice. It's been a while. How you been?
Oh, very good.
Good. Me too. Can't complain.
So you turn 80 this weekend. You have any feelings about that?
Well, no, not really. I just don't think I feel that old.
So that continues, because I don't. Everybody says that, right? I don't feel as old as I thought I would at 40, etc.
Right. You don't know how you're supposed to feel, though, in the first place, do you?
No, that's true.
It's your first time, yeah. Do you still look in the mirror and think, I'm still that kid? I know. I still remember being a kid.
I look in the mirror and think I'm 50 years old.
Yeah.
I know a guy who's 96, and he says all the time, I may not look it, but I sure feel it. But you're healthier than the average 80-year-old that I know.
Well, I think so, too, because I don't feel old.
When's the last time you rode a horse?
Oh, last week.
There you go. Still riding a horse, so, that's a regular thing. When do you have any, anticipated time that you think maybe you'd be too old for riding a horse?
I'm shooting for 85.
There you go.
Yeah, like George H.W. Bush. You finally stopped skydiving. With me, I used to mountain bike a lot. Now I don't because I know how long it would take to heal. I know you're a really good horseman, but I'm guessing, if you flew off your horse, it'd take a while to bounce back at this point.
Well, that's something that you don't do at my age. I've done that about 4 years ago, and I'm not going to do that again.
Well, the horse gets a say in it, though, doesn't he? I mean, what if you're...
Well, you know what, Joe? You just got to buy a very old, slow horse.
Right, and listen, if you're going to stop living, what's the point of living?
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Yeah, so, 4 years ago, that's when the horse... What caused your horse to throw you off?
Well, I was going across a trail down in Apache Junction, and this lady come up out of a ditch, and all my horse could see when she popped out of there was her head, and the horse just freaked out, turned around right quick and started going, got my spurs stuck in his side, and he went to bucking, and I went out on my head.
Ouch.
And that's when you broke your pelvis?
No, that was before that.
Oh. Yeah, so this is a different time when you're almost 80 years old.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. So you can buy, it usually costs more to buy horses that are way less likely to throw you off. So that's what you do once you turn 80, I guess. So the reason I wanted to have you on is I have told a little bit about your upbringing to people before, and they say that's not possibly true. Because people don't realize that rural America was the way it was compared to big cities and the coasts in the United States. You were born in 1937, which is the easy math for being 80 years old. Where were you born?
Well, in Decatur County, Iowa.
And how many brothers and sisters?
Well, I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters.
And you were how many born in a hospital?
The very last one.
The rest of you were born at home. And how old were you when you guys got electricity?
I was probably about 11 or 12.
And I tell people that all the time, and they say that is not true.
So that was several years post WW2.
Yeah, that is not that's possibly not true. That in 1949 you got electricity, but that is true. And I actually, after I got old enough to understand that what it was, I did more reading about it. FDR sent Herbert Hoover out across the country to do a study on what was going on because he realized that the whole country was not on the same page. And Herbert Hoover came back and said, you're not going to believe this, but most of the country doesn't even have electricity yet.
Wow.
Because, Chicago had electricity in the 1880s.
Yeah.
They didn't have electricity in Decatur, Iowa in 1940.
Well, see, this is REA. That's when they had the REA came in and put in all the lines out to the rural places.
So what was the change like when you got electricity? I mean, first of all, before you had electricity...
You ran home from school every day and turned up the switch to see if the lights was on yet.
Yeah, because it was so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exciting.
So but before you had the electricity, though, did you go to bed when it got dark, or what'd you do?
No, we had kerosene lamps, and it didn't seem, you didn't know any better, so it didn't seem like it was a bad thing at all.
So you didn't stare at the TV all day hoping for electricity to come on?
There was no TVs.
Yeah, that's amazing. You got to get to the plumbing part, though. I mean, no electricity would be crazy, but how old were you when you got indoor plumbing?
When I left home to go to college in 1955, we still didn't have running water.
Wow. So you had a well?
We had a well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you were in Beaconsfield, which...
You had to go out and pump it and bring the water in the house in a bucket.
Yeah, from the town pump, which when we were kids, we'd go visit Grandma and Grandpa, his parents, in Beaconsfield, Iowa. They have a town pump in the middle, and my brother and I would go to the town pump and pump water into a bucket because it was fun. The town pump was still there.
Yeah.
It was a thing. And everybody'd walk there, and you'd talk about, how's your night? Oh, pretty good and everything.
Sure.
Like everybody's filling a bucket up with water.
So water cooler talk was pump talk.
Yeah.
Well talk. Well, and it's funny. I got to make a little editorial comment here because you mentioned going off to college, and I think there's a tendency, I don't think it, I know it, among, particularly urban people or whatever, to picture a guy like you growing up where you did as like simple folk. Listen to that. No indoor plumbing, no electricity. When the truth is, I'm guessing you and your buddies at age 18 were about 20 times more capable than a lot of the people who live with luxuries. I'll bet you could do a hell of a lot of useful things.
Oh, yeah. Back in them days, you fixed your own cars and you did everything.
So going backwards a little bit, so the school situation, what was your schooling like when you were a kid?
Well, that's pretty interesting, too. I started in a one-room schoolhouse from kindergarten through the 5th grade. And
all the kids were in one room, all grades?
Kindergarten through 8 was in one room, and the little kids listened to everything that was going on with the big kids, and you got smarter quicker that way, too.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And
then in the 5th grade, we moved to a different area, and then that's when I started going to the town school.
Well,
and I graduated in a class of 5.
5 people in his graduating class. His older brother, Willis, was the only person in his class.
Yeah.
He was the class president.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, getting back to the...
That's with me. I was the fifth place in my class.
That looked pretty good on a resume.
That's good, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Hey, but getting back to all the grades being together, how many kids total typically?
Did what?
How many kids were in that room where all the grades were together?
Well, I suppose about 15.
Okay.
So 15 kids in one school, and that's that school you've showed us before that's out in that field now. How did you get there in the morning?
We walked 2 miles to school, but now it wasn't uphill both ways.
Snowed every day, even in August.
Yeah. We walked to school. It was 2 miles, and then we cut across the fields going, and then in the evening or coming home, we'd all walk together down the road.
So was your situation with no electricity and no plumbing until you went off to college, was that typical for people around there? Was that the way almost everybody was, or just a few people, or what?
There was probably more that had all that than didn't by that time.
Were they seen as like putting on airs or something, like being pretentious with your indoor plumbing?
We were all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that whole thing work?
The kids might have had running water and so forth, but they milked the cows before they came to school, and you could still smell the,
Right. But did you ever say, hey, Dad, how about a toilet? Come on now.
No, you don't. You didn't think about that.
Right. And so you had the outhouse outside, and if you had to relieve yourself, well, first of all, what was your sleeping situation?
The sleeping situation?
Yeah.
It was just 2 boys to a bed.
And then if you had to get up in the middle of the night to relieve yourself, you had to go outside to the outhouse in the winter in Iowa.
Yeah, you did.
Wow. I have sympathy for you as a kid, but now that I'm an older man, Ken, I really have sympathy for your dad, because that seems to happen now and again.
What you mean, Joe?
I'm telling you, I might have a Gatorade bottle or a bedpan or something.
Yeah.
If you thought you were going to have to, like at my current age, you have to go out maybe 3 times a night, you'd monitor your liquid intake before you went to bed.
Or get a big Gatorade bottle.
In the middle of winter?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. So
back in those days, you took a whiz off the back porch.
There you go.
So were you?
Jack still does that. You know that, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's teaching your grandsons to pee in the yard.
Did you know, Henry, if he's watching TV and he has to pee, he doesn't even think of going to the bathroom. He goes over to the sliding glass door, he opens it, he stands there and pees into the bushes, and then comes back in the house. So I guess apparently it runs in our genes. So were you paying attention to the outside world in Decatur County, Iowa, with no electricity and plumbing? I mean, were you aware that Chicago, which isn't even that far away, that they had electricity and all that stuff?
Oh, I don't think we even thought about it.
Right.
That wouldn't even cross your mind.
You just had work to do, huh?
Yeah. But you didn't feel like that. You was being slighted at all. You didn't know any better.
Sure.
Yeah, that's so true. I think about the size of the house I grew up in compared to the size of the house I own right now. And if I were to go back to that house, I think I'd feel really claustrophobic in it. But at the time, I loved it. It was home. It was perfectly comfortable.
That's right. That's just the way it is. If you had to go back, you wouldn't like it so much. But at the time, it was no problem. Well,
and certainly without social media and all that sort of stuff, you didn't spend all your time comparing yourself to other situations to, coming up with reasons to feel bad.
No, you didn't even think that way at all.
Right. Speaking of which, we've been talking some this week about how, cable news especially is just constant gloom and doom and hate and death and the rest of it. Do you watch it much? And do you ever think the difference between the life you were living back in Iowa and now all this input of ugliness?
Well, I follow the news pretty closely, and I don't like what's going on, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I'm starting to think it's not so healthy to take in too much of it. I don't think we're designed to.
Yeah, you can do it too much, and if that's the case, you just shut the darn thing off and walk out in the yard and do something.
Or shoot it like Elvis.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Dad, before we let you go, Michelangelo, who is my mom's favorite, by the way.
Yeah,
and always
can blame her.
Michelangelo has a question for you.
Yeah, was Jack a difficult child to raise?
Was he?
Yeah.
No, he was not at all.
Not a lot of discipline, huh?
All of our kids was just pretty good, easily to raise, yeah.
Yeah, we should have you raise Henry.
That's nice. Now, do you remember the day you looked across the table at Jack during dinner and said, "Son, you don't need to make a joke about everything"? Because he's told me about that 10 times.
And I said it to Sam the other day.
Well, I imagine I said a lot of things.
Yeah, I did try to make a joke out of everything, which can be annoying, as I've now learned. Before we let you go, just in general, what do you have any comment on 80 years of living, any philosophy of life you've come up with, or any attitude or thing you'd tell somebody younger, hey, trust me, when you get to be 80, you'll wish you'd have done this, or anything like that?
I've thought about that, and I think the main thing is just to stay active. Don't just be a couch potato. Have some interest and get out and do something. Never say you're bored. Just get out and do something.
Yeah, fill your days. Yeah, that's great.
Well, so what's your plan? I know you got a big plan for today. You're headed off to where?
We're going to Laughlin for a couple of days.
Because there's a big music festival, and it's going to be 110 degrees.
Well, there's a bar right inside the door.
All right. So stay hydrated. You got the indoor plumbing now, and it doesn't matter.
You got to stay hydrated.
Get up as many times as you need.
Awesome. Well, my dad, thanks for coming on, Dad.
Yeah, Ken, it's great to talk to you and hear from you.
Yeah, good to talk to you guys again.
You bet. I'll call you on your birthday.
All right.
All right, see ya.
All right, bye-bye.
I know, it's just, how different rural America, and that's not just like a county and a state. Most of America was like that.
The fact that the president of the United States was surprised by that also says something about, the nature of life and connectedness in those days.
Yeah. And
it wasn't a tragedy. I mean, I'm sure there was some old farmer who wandered out to the outhouse in the middle of the night in the winter and he got lost and he died. That's a tragedy. But the life that they were living then was not tragic nor horrifying.
I got to admit, I didn't realize that they didn't have indoor plumbing until when he went off to college. I didn't know it was that late.
What's
so
this?
That's 1950 freaking 5.
Yeah. I can't remember the setting, but we stayed somewhere at one point when I was a kid out in rural Illinois where there was an outhouse. That was the only option. I can't remember. As a kid, I remember I was rather shocked, particularly by the odors.
The one-room schoolhouse is still there in a field. And I've seen it a few years ago. The blackboards they would stand at and work on their ciphering. All of them in one room.
Time to revive it. Call it a charter school. Get the kids to come in there.
I want to say thank you for Jack's dad for coming on. I loved that segment. Thank you, Jack, for having the idea of bringing him Sean Gold Star next to that guest name. Book him again.
Stay tuned to the Armstrong and Getty Show.